Welcome to Charged Up Creations. I'm your host Trevor, and we got a good video for you today. Stay tuned. As you can see behind me, it's just about Christmas time, so I figured I'd sculpt the Grinch. I mean, why not? So let's get right into the video. But before we get started, see that little red button right down there? Click on that and it'll help me out a lot. Thanks. So to start off, I'm just using a little bit of armature wire and taping it just where it joints together so it kind of holds shape. And then I start stuffing it with newspaper just to give it some more bulk and shape, and wrapping the whole thing with masking tape just to make sure everything's nicely tightly packed. Wrapping it with some tin foil again just to make sure it's nice and tightly packed, and then it's pretty much good. So this is the armature. It's pretty much just a little bit of wire, a little bit of newspaper, and a little bit more tin foil. So this is just the basic shape of the Grinch, and we're gonna do a base layer of Sculpey on this, throw it in the oven, and then we'll get into detailing. Once the armature is all made, the biggest concern is just getting that tin foil covered with a base layer of Sculpey. You see a difference in color from the Sculpey, which is no big deal. I'm just using scrap Sculpey just to use it and get rid of it kind of. So that's going to get covered again in the second layer, so don't worry about that. So this is the base form. Just basically wanted to cover all the tin foil, got everything of that all covered up, and then we'll throw it in the oven for the recommended time to bake this, and then we'll add a lot more detail and form from there. So yeah, here we go. I threw the original base form into the oven for about 15 minutes at 275 degrees, I believe. That's what it said on the wrapping. So I let that cool down, and it was the next day. So that's when I started building up the form and shape, just adding little blobs of clay here and there, starting to add the main shape and form of the Grinch sculpture, and that's pretty much it. You can see that I'm using different tools, Sculpey tools, different shapes and sizes just to blend out some of those little blobs of clay that I added. It'll help with the smoothing later on in the process, just basically feathering out the little added pieces of clay. Unfortunately, I must have turned off my GoPro, and when doing so, it reverted back to shooting live footage instead of the time lapse. So you get this kind of really choppy effect, which can be cool for future use in the video. But unfortunately, I lost a lot of my process, probably a couple hours worth of sculpting, because it was shooting in live and not the time lapse. So I'm sorry about that, but there's nothing really I can do. I guess it's a live and learn kind of situation. Instead of making you watch that very choppy looking video after trying to speed up the video from editing, I'd figure I'd show you some real time sculpting. This is just me hitting it with some 91% alcohol to smooth out the clay and kind of join in all the forms pretty seamlessly. And I'll do this throughout my whole process of sculpting, building up form, knocking it back down, and smoothing it out with the alcohol, and eventually finishing it with the alcohol just to give it a nice smooth texture, ready for baking in the end. Again, I have some live recording of me sculpting, just showing you how meticulous this sculpture was. I'm not used to sculpting in a smaller scale, so just adding little tiny small blobs of clay actually makes a huge difference in the form of the sculpture. So I'm just showing you here how meticulous it actually was. I can't remember exactly how long this sculpt ended up being, but it was probably around 12 to 15 hours. I know that's a little bit of a gap, but I wasn't really worried about the time, more just focused on getting the sculpture done in a reasonable amount of time. Same thing with sculpting. I'm using a different size brush to smooth out smaller areas with that rubbing alcohol, and just kind of showing you guys that it's basically the same thing repeated, and getting a nice smooth finish on your piece is really crucial. And this is just kind of earlier stages smoothing, and I'll be doing this back and forth throughout the whole process.
Oh, salt. Didn't have to put salt in there. It's a little salty.
Wow, thanks Dad. I'm sure my viewers really loved your input on my video. Finally, I realized that I was in the wrong mode while I was shooting, so we're back to the normal time lapse of me sculpting. I think it's a lot more enjoyable to watch and kind of see it come to shape in a lot quicker time than the live recording. So here I'm just going in with more detail, more layers. That's basically all it is to sculpting. And once I get done with all the detailing and smoothing out with the alcohol, I'll throw it back into the oven. I baked it for about 30 minutes this time because the clay was a little bit thicker in certain parts. And then I'll get into painting, which that I also did in a time lapse, and it went very quickly. I was doing it with an airbrush, and I also was running out of battery. It was about 11 or 12 o'clock at night, and I was just pushing to get this thing done, and I ended up getting it done about a day after Christmas. And what you don't see at the end of the painting process, I do add a darker tone for the nose, and then I add like a pinky tone for his bottom lip, and then of course I do the eyes, and I gloss over the eyes and bottom lip with some Mod Podge, which worked really well, and I was super happy how this thing came out in the end. Here we go with the paint. I just hit the base really quick with some black, and then I mixed up a custom color like a Kelly green just to lightly airbrush the whole thing. And then I end up mixing a darker tone and doing a whole wash over the entire sculpture, and then wiping away the high points, or the highlights rather. And then I basically just keep on adding different layers. I go back in with the highlight, and then I do some more depth painting with a darker tone. And I just keep on working back and forth from there, trying to get this thing to pop as much detail as it possibly can with all the hair texture. So unfortunately, like I said, I lost some of the footage because my battery ran out. So I lost that. But BAM! There he is, Mr. Grinch himself, the one who stole Christmas. This is a fun little project for Christmas time. It was actually a day after Christmas I got this guy completed. He's got glossy eyes, glossy lip. If you guys liked this content and want to see more, make sure you hit that subscribe button right down there in the lower right hand corner, and also smash that like button if you want to see more content like this. As always, make sure you comment down below. Tell me what you think of the project, what you want to see me do in the future. This is Trevor from Charged Up Creations, signing off.